you very much. It's nice to be here tonight. Thank you for the invitation, Yossi, Ruti. And I will try to give some insights from my side. I will make it more on the political side and try to give a few insights about the paradox of increasingly visible German politics regarding the populist far-right party, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, which most of you probably already heard about, and show you how the right far anti-Semitism in Germany is occurring in the moment. Of course, there are other parts of anti-Semitism that I will not touch at the moment from other sides, but we can speak about it afterwards in the questions around. So feel free also to ask about those subjects. Yeah, to understand the anti-Semitism and the populist far right, I think we must look at their slogans and examine their function and their rhetoric. Based on recent analysis that we also did as a Adenauer Foundation, we found the different aspects about this subject. And I want to give you 9 points, 9 theses on why the solidarity that the far right in Germany, but we see it also in Europe and other places, try to show regards to Israel and to Judaism is instrumental and not genuine. So maybe the first part I will take upon the subject of the facade against the reality. And my first point will be that the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, tries to adopt a strategy of self-declared monopolization of pro-Israel support. We see it already, we saw it actually more before the 7th of October, and we saw it during or in the first weeks and months of the 7th of October. Then we saw some changes, but we saw that they aggressively tried to rebrand themselves as the ultimate friend of Israel. High-ranking figures, maybe you heard already once the name Alice Weidel, the party chairman, or one of the party's chairman, claim that the AfD is the only defender of Jewish people in Germany. They frame Israel as the West in a hostile environment, suggesting that standing with Israel is like defending the German way of life. This is a strategy that attempts to position themselves as the only alternative to the left wing, not only in Germany, but in all the left-wing establishment, which they claim has abandoned Israel. We saw some changes with time, also after the 7th of October, and as the war continued in Israel, and also more voices also in Germany and Europe were more critical about Israel, but it was the usual tone that we heard from this party and from people that are affiliated with it. The second point, the second thesis is that solidarity is actually one-sided and it's imposed, and actually it's one-sided imposed, and it's also rejected by the supposedly people that they are trying to support. So we see a very strong disconnect between how the AfD views itself and how it is being viewed by the Jews in Germany. While the AfD claims that they protect Jewish life, of course, fight against anti-Semitism, the Central Council of Jews, which is the major player regarding the Jewish communities in Germany and representing them towards the politics and society, and also 16 others organizations have explicitly declared that the party is an anti-democratic party and not a home for Jew hatred and not a home for Jewish people, and actually try to have a kind of relativism for Holocaust. And the solidarity it's actually a one-way street, and the Jewish community try to reject those protectors viewing this party as actually as an existential threat for their own surviving, for their own future in Germany. A third point, that the party base remains deeply entrenched in anti-Semitic attitudes. Despite these sound bites that I already described from the leadership trying to show themselves as very pro-Israel and very protective of Jewish life, empirical data tells us exactly the opposite. We did also another study on as a Adenauer Foundation in Germany a few years ago, 2023, before the 7th of October about how anti-Semitic propaganda and statements are being dealt in the different parties. And we saw that the AfD supporters agree with a high percentage with anti-Semitic statements, and the rate is getting even higher, is higher than the average population that we see, and higher than also in other party, much higher even than other parties. And the pro-Israel rhetoric of the leadership is, of course, also the part as a part of the base that they are trying to bring along with them, and a lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and nationalist thinking remains a very hard and very deep connection of this party with their own voters. We had a few years ago, many years ago, actually a neo-Nazi party that was or they tried to ban it. It was partly banned, and a lot of voters, a lot of supporters of this party went to the AfD and today are a part of it. Also, the Office of the Protection of the Constitution, which is a very unique institution for Germany, declared already the AfD and far-right parties as the AfD as anti-Semitic, and also ruled that they are a threat for Jewish life, and are not supporters, of course, that Judaism and Jewish life can prevail in Germany. And this is something that the AfD is trying always to ignore. Some major voices that you probably heard also in the past from party leaders describing the time of the Holocaust, or the time that the Nazi socialists were in power, as just a small story in the big history of Germany, and other relativation that we heard about this time in the last years from different people of this party. Point number 4, pro-Israel rhetoric serves as a cover of historical revisionism. Support for Israel in the AfD often consists with a desire to erase historic guilt from Germany. We see a pattern when leaders make anti-Semitic or revisionist statements, such as, like I said before, challenging the culture of remembrance, which is deep inside of German self-determination, how they see themselves and how they see their future. And they're always also political leaders, but also society leaders that are affiliated with the far right are trying always to put this in the front and to show that actually there is no need to remember the past anymore, and we should go to another level. And the logic that they are employing in this case is, if we support the Jewish state today, we cannot be accused of Nazi elements or Nazi sympathism in some kind of way, which is, of course, very crude, but it's part of the strategy that we see that they are going through. And this allows them actually to try to demand, to draw a line under the Holocaust, and also claiming, like I said, in a parallel way, to be the best friend that the Jewish people have in Germany, and of course Israel as itself. Maybe to a third part of my thoughts, the instrumental functions that they use. So as a fifth point, what I can see is that the primary function of being pro-Israel, or trying to be pro-Israel, or pro-Israel rhetoric, is to legitimize their own anti-Muslim racism. The most significant driver of AfD support is not very surprising. Is also in regard of Israel, is not affection for Zionism or for Jewish people. It's more the rejection of Islam by itself. If you look at the party's 2025 election manifesto, Jewish life is being acknowledged, but only while it's threatened primarily by Muslims. If we look at other parties and other programs of parties for the last election, if we look at the conservative parties, which we are affiliated with, Israel and Jewish life were mentioned 22 times. Also in the party's program of the Social Democrats, more than 15 times. Green Party, left parties, of course, in some points also critical about what is happening in Israel, what is happening also regarding the war in Gaza, but still acknowledging it as a factor and also trying to manifest the special relationship between Germany and Israel. This is something that the AfD didn't do in their last program, which is another indication for their view about the subject. And they are trying to frame the conflict also in our region, in Israel and in the Middle East, as a Judeo-Christian West against Islam. They use the solidarity actually as a moral shield to justify harsh anti-Muslim policies and rhetoric. And actually, in this case, Israel is often being taken as an instrument, as a weapon against the party's domestic enemies, and just to try to cover up other subjects. As the sixth point, solidarity is used often to unmask and attack political centrist party or other parties as at all. The AfD tries to use anti-Semitic crisis to attack the center-right parties, usually the CDU, CSU, but also the center-left parties, as the Social Democrats and the Liberals that are not now in the parliament anymore. They try to argue that the rise of anti-Semitism is solely the fault of the immigration policies that the former Chancellor Merkel did during the years of 2010, of course, with the highest wave that we had 2015 with Syrian immigration. And this is the only fault that anti-Semitism actually still exists in Germany. If this immigration wouldn't come, no anti-Semitism and no other problems will have been seen in Germany in the last years. So they are focusing on this imported anti-Semitism that came in the last years, and they try to attempt to absolve the ethnic German far right of its, they try to exempt it as of its anti-Semitism, and actually paint a sort of blame on the other parties that are creating a Germany that is actually bad for the Jews, bad for Israel, and bad for the German themselves, in the same narrative that they are using those anti-Semitic slanders. The seventh point, they also use the narrative of the strong state that overshadows democratic values as another perspective that we can see, and as they try to use Israel as a kind of instrument in their different arguments. When the AfD praises Israel, they are rarely praising it as a vibrant democracy, or because of its judicial system, or because of the pluralism that is in the country. Instead, they admire Israel as a model of a strong ethnocracy, that is a state that enforces borders ruthlessly, which figures. We have a lot of figures in Germany from the far right that are trying to use explicitly the Germany should copy actually Israel's rule and the hard approach of deportation, of border control, border security, and they project their own law and order fantasies on the way that Israel tries to solve their problems in this region, and even tries in some cases to say that could be different instruments that Germany could use in order to survive the migration crisis that Germany went through. As an eighth point, we can say that the strategy is designed to distract from their own self-anti-Semitism, this anti-Semitism that I already mentioned, that is going inside of the party and with people that are affiliated with it. The AfD employs distraction tactics to hide the anti-Semitism within its own ranks. There are organizations, maybe you heard about it, that try to build a group that is called the Jews in the AfD. So people from the Jewish community, some of them weren't even really affiliated with the Jewish community in the past, and tried to build a group inside of the AfD in order to give them some kind of a kosher stamp and giving them another sense of being a part and helping Jews inside of Germany and inside of Europe. The maneuver all allows the party also to deflect from accusation of extremism by pointing out their token support for Israel. And as I already mentioned before, those are different ways to actually to distract from their own problems, from own anti-Semitism, also from own figures that are slandering anti-Semitic arguments and trying to launch their own arguments against actually against Jews and against Israel in the end. And as a ninth and last point, the international dimension of those developments as we see them, we can call it as a false friend trap that poses also for Israel a very severe diplomatic risk. While the Israeli government and also the ambassador today, Ron Prosor in Germany, have maintained a strict policy of no contact with the AfD, there are voices also inside of Israeli right. Of course, there was a few months ago, and now again a right anti-Semitism conference held here by the Israeli government, which also did not bring people from the AfD, but they brought people that are in the European context in these surroundings. And this is something that we see also again and again, especially in the framework of trying to see the connection between the anti-Muslim strategy of the AfD, which some people see as a connection also to for them being pro-Israel, which is of course non-existing. And this is of course dangerous in times that Israel and others have noted that the AfD is split on this question, and its more moderate wing is often more facade, and they're more anti-Semitic and more, I would call it, a nationalist wing is gaining more power and aligning the AfD with more groups and parties of this kind in the region. We saw also the different ties that the AfD has with different other more anti-Semitical right-wing extremist parties in Europe. Of course, also the speech of J.D. Vance 1 year ago in the Munich Security Conference, actually telling the German that they should, or the new German government, they should make a coalition with the AfD together, which is, of course, under today German politics unthinkable. Also see other parties in Europe that are trying to maintain this contact and bring the AfD inside of this game. And Israel has, of course, already some connections to different groups inside of the inside of or with groups that are affiliated with the AfD. And this is something that we have to look upon and see how we can tackle. And it's of course something that changes the way that the AfD is working, because they are seeing that they have more and more possibilities to work inside of the framework that they are creating for themselves with other groups inside of Europe and with other also American affiliations. Elon Musk is one of them, but with others, and in this way also gaining more trust in the world and making their policy broader. Maybe just two statements to the end of my presentation. We see different aspects of anti-Semitism in this group, more in a political way, which is often a very difficult to tackle. Germany doesn't have a real policy how to tackle the AfD. The AfD is today, if we look at surveys, by the biggest party with 26%. The second party, according to surveys that are just were presented in the last days, the second party is the CDU-CSU from the more conservative background with 23%. So we see a growth on this in this passage. And we call it in Germany the firewall, the Brandmauer, that means that no other party will do a coalition with the AfD, is crumbling in some points. And this is, of course, something that we, looking at from Israel, also for the region, have to tackle with. Also, the instrumentalization of Islamist anti-Semitism is something that we can also maybe talk about later. And of course, also exploiting the left's failure is something that the AfD is putting in their agenda, trying to push only that there is only anti-Semitism in the Islamic world and of course in the left, but no anti-Semitism in the far right, which is a big subject that has to be tackled. And there is no real solution for it in the moment in Germany, as the voters have their own decision which parties they want to see in government and in politics. Thank you very much.